What do you mean you're pregnant? Cooper Mike's voice exploded through the small room, his face contorted with anger. Vicky flinched, her hands trembling as she clutched her stomach. You think you can just drop this on me and everything will be fine? He spat, pacing back and forth, his eyes burning with fury. Tears welled up in her eyes, her breath hitching. I didn't plan this, she stammered. This is a very emotional and interesting story that all parents must watch, in order to make sure that their children don't end up in the wrong path in life. Don't forget to like, comment where you are watching from and subscribe to our channel for more educative and lesson-filled videos
who was
like
known
this.
in her school as Vicky, is a very pretty and intelligent young girl. She is in her senior secondary school too. Vicky dreamed of becoming a surgeon. Her mother Elizabeth has always tried her best to see Vicky through her secondary school level and had hopes God would provide for her to complete her university level and achieve her dreams. Vicky is a very nice girl who was always used as example to other girls in the school, starting from her neatness to her attitude, then her intelligence. So many times she has won Best Student of the Year in her school. Her mother, Elizabeth, has always encouraged her to do her best to fulfill the dreams she had promised her late father, Elizabeth. Vicky's mother had lost her husband to the cold hands of death. He worked in a factory right there in Impr village where they are from. He was cold hands of death. He worked in a factory right there in Impr village where they are from. He was working night shift in the factory when an explosion occurred. He was caught in the fire and died on the spot. When the news of his death reached Elizabeth, she cried out her eyes. "Why will you leave me and our only child in this world?" Elizabeth asked, wishing she could get a reply. Who will fulfill his dreams of training their only daughter to the university to become a surgeon? After the death of Mr. Linus, Vicky's father, Elizabeth struggled a lot to feed both herself and Vicky. She made sure she was able to continue paying Vicky's tuition fees. She didn't want the dream of the family to die with her husband. It was a new term, and new teachers were employed into Emak Brilliant School, Umwokpa. Of all the new teachers employed, there was this particular one that was the talk of the female students. He is a fine young man. He was young and hot. He was posted for his NISC in Vicky's school. Vicky was determined to come out of secondary school with flying colours, till Corper Michael entered into her school. He changed the narrative and made Vicky fall in love with him. Vicky was still naive and couldn't explain what she was feeling. She wanted to tell her mother, but the fear of getting scolded made her keep it to herself. Corper Michael and Vicky continued their secret love till he invited Vicky to his house after school and told her not to let anyone know where she was going. Vicky was happy she was going to visit her crush in his house for the first time. Corper Michael welcomed Vicky into his house. He started touching her. Vicky has not known any man before, so she kept pushing him away. She had a crush on him, but her upbringing couldn't let her do anything with him. Corper Michael saw Vicky won't let him touch her. He forced himself on Vicky and raped her. When he was done, she cried out in pains with her blood on the sheets. Michael didn't actually believe Vicky was a virgin when she had told him earlier. He begged her to close her mouth. He promised her he would marry her and take her all over the world, but she should not let anyone know what had happened. Vicky was so scared of what her mother will do to her if she found out she had visited a male teacher in his house. Her mother has always warned her not to go to the house if any boy, especially the one that is staying alone. After the incident, Vicky started visiting the house of Corper Michael secretly, because he had promised to marry her even if she got pregnant for him. A few weeks later, Vicky discovered that she was pregnant. She had come to give the news to Corper Michael, and now he is indirectly calling her a prostitute and walking out on her. Vicky broke down in tears. She has been used. She went home and started thinking of a way to end her life. But Corper Michael, secretly, because he had promised to marry her even if she got pregnant for him. Few weeks later, Vicky discovered that she was pregnant. She had come to give the news to Corper Michael, and now he is indirectly calling her a prostitute and walking out on her. Vicky broke down in tears. She has been used. She went home and started thinking of a way to end her life. But her mother has sacrificed everything for her. She couldn't imagine how her mother will feel. Days went by, and Elizabeth found out her daughter was pregnant. She was broken. All the dreams her and her husband had for their only daughter was about to come to an end. Her beard pressure skyrocketed when she couldn't take it anymore. She died of a heart attack. Vicky cried and cried when her mother died. She quickly called people who came and took her mother's C at PSE to the M at URI. Vicky ran as far as her legs could carry her to Corper Michael's house. His neighbours told her Corper Michael had left the village 2 days ago. Vicky fell on the floor as tears rolled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mama. Mama, forgive me. Please, Mama, forgive me." Vicky kept shouting as rivers of tears poured down her cheeks. Tears kept flowing down uncontrollably down the cheeks of Victoria. She has failed her parents. She has forgotten all her mother went through just to make sure she attends one of the best schools in Muokpa after the death of her father. Oh, how she has messed up. Elizabeth had struggled a lot. She cleared people's farmland. She hawked foodstuffs along the way. She ran after vehicles just to make cells, even under the rain, because she wanted to keep the dream of the family alive. Vivi, my child, I know your dad has left us alone in this world, but I am making a promise to you that I will try all my possible best to make sure you realize your dream of becoming a surgeon. I don't know how, but I know God will make it possible. Also, promise me that you won't let me or your father down. I won't, Mama Vicky replied with a smile. I promise to do my best and make you and Papa proud. That's why I love you, Vivi. You're just like your father. Elizabeth said, holding the chin of Vicky. Victoria remembered the promise she had made to her mother, and tears flowed down her cheeks uncontrollably as she continued to ask her mother to forgive her. Vicky, 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 someone kept calling. She turned back, and it was her friend Omalicha. She heard what happened and came to console her, but she didn't see her at home. Instead, someone had told her she ran towards the house of Corper Michael. What are you doing in front of Corper Michael's house? You should be at home receiving those that want to pay their condolence for the death of your mum. Vicky looked at Omalicha. What was she going to answer? That Corper Michael impregnated her and ran away? Or that she keyed her mother? She knew her mother had high blood pressure, BP. Why didn't she even think of that before allowing Corper Michael to deceive her? Her tears began flowing again and she shook her head. No, nothing, she answered and started crying again. Omalicha was aware Victoria liked Michael, but never knew she was already visiting him. Victoria had it kept a secret from everyone, including her best friend Omalicha. Omalicha helped her to stand up from where she was sitting on the ground and tried wiping the dirt from her body. She held Victoria by her hand and took her back to her parents' house. The more people came to say sorry to Vicky, the more she cried, knowing fully the cause of her mother's death. Omalicha didn't leave Vicky's side. She decided to stay with her. When Omalicha's parents found out what had befallen Vicky, they took pity on her. They have always known Victoria as a very good and intelligent girl, so they decided to take her to their house to stay with them. They promised to take care of her. That was the much they can do for her, as their daughter's best friend. Vicky was so happy her world wasn't over yet. Omalicha helped Victoria to pack few of her stuffs and took her to her house. Omalicha's parents promised Victoria that they would take care of her school fees too. Vicky was filled with joy. Thank you, Ma and Sir, she said to Omalicha's parents. I "Promise I will never let you down," Vicky said to Omalicha's parents, who nodded with a smile. Victoria hugged Omalicha and they both went into Omalicha's room. Vicky tried to put her past behind her, as Omalicha had advised her. As the day go by, Mrs. Folkham, Omalicha's mother, just started noticing that Victoria was pregnant. She wanted to be sure. When she confirmed the fact that Victoria was actually pregnant, Mrs. Folkham threw Victoria out of her house with the little bag she had moved into their house with. Omalicha kept begging her mother to let Vicky stay, but the plea fell on deaf ears. "No wonder your mother deed. I'm sure she found out her daughter has become a prostitute. Leave my house before you corrupt my daughter," Mrs. Folkham said as she threw Victoria's things out of her house. She warned Omalicha never to associate herself ever again with Victoria. The words of Mrs. Folkham were too painful. Victoria could feel sharp pains in her head. She held her heart as she fell on the floor, crying out buckets of tears. The more Victoria cried, the more the density of the pain increased. She started shaking as a result of so much tears. Victoria stood up, slowly picked up her bag and started going towards her house. It was already late, so she managed herself and went into her house. The next day, Victoria had gotten herself prepared for school. She has always been an early bird. Victoria dressed neatly as usual and went to school. She could see fellow students pointing at her. Some laughed while some shook their head in disbelief when they heard she was pregnant. Victoria was surprised how the news had spread like wildfire all over the school within few hours. Mrs. Folkham found out. When class started, her classmates turned around and gossiped with her name. Victoria saw Omalicha walking into the class. Omalicha had been in the principal's office ever since she came to school. They were trying to confirm if truly Victoria was pregnant. Victoria rushed towards Omalicha to hug her, at least to reduce some pains. Omalicha turned her back on her and walked away. Her mother, Mrs. Folkham, had warned her sternly to stay away from Victoria. It was Mrs. Folkham that told the school authorities that Victoria, their best student, was pregnant. Victoria tried her best to hold the tears in by folding her lips, but the pain was so much she couldn't hold the tears back. Even her best friend had turned her back on her too. As the tears flowed down the cheeks of Victoria, she ran back to her sit and placed her head on the desk, crying. Some students pitied her, while others made fun of her. "Our Virgin Mary is pregnant," a student said, and others bursted out laughing. "Don't you know pretenders do the worst?" another student said. Another carried a water flask and raised it up in the front of the class and shouted, "Best in prostitution goes to Vicky, Vicky," some guy screamed. Victoria felt as if the ground should open and swallow her. She wanted to escape from the class but don't know how to. Suddenly the class became calm and everyone was seated. Victoria raised her head and saw the principal inside her class. "Victoria, Linus," he called out. Victoria stood up slowly, wiping off her tears. "Carry your bag and follow me to my office," he said and walked away. At the principal's office, "News getting to us suggests that you are pregnant, is that true?" he asked, looking at Victoria. She nodded her head slowly in acceptance. "Can you tell me who is responsible?" the principal asked. "It's Corper, Michel," Victoria said, and a tear dropped down her cheeks. "No wonder he left earlier than expected, telling me he had an emergency. You should have told me the instant he made advances towards you. Now see the mess you've gotten yourself into." "I shouldn't be doing, but I will. These are some of his files," the principal said, handing them over to Victoria with a letter of expulsion. "I'm sorry, Victoria, but you're expelled from this school and can't continue schooling in any reputable school in Umokapa. Parents have it that you'll be a bad egg to their children." Victoria broke down in tears as she collected the file and letter from the principal and walked out of his office and the school. No mother ever wanted her child to associate with Victoria. Women would raise the tip of their lips up and shake their head at her when she walked along the road, while some men keep calling her to have a taste of her too. Victoria hasn't eaten since the morning. but hunger was far from her. She was filled with her own tears. Victoria kept on thinking of a way forward. A thought came into her head. She needs to leave the village, but where will she go to? But it was better for her to die off in an unknown land than to die of depression in the village. That same night, Victoria carried some of her things and left the village in the dark when one will see her. She didn't know where she was going, where she would find herself. She wasn't sure. She just wanted to leave the village. As she walked, she began to feel dizzy and fell down.
Parents, guardians and elders. Take your children as your responsibility irrespective of their age and gender. A mistake might not probably be a mistake. The mistake lies in repeating it. Stay tuned, stay alert. Subscribe for more intensive videos like this.